From a social perspective, the arrival of the First Crusade was less a single event and more a profound seismic shock to the communities of the Levant. The immediate impact wasn't just military, it was a wave of widespread anxiety and social dislocation that tore through the populace. We see this firsthand in the Damascus Chronicle by Ibn al-Qalanisi. As a well-educated politician in Damascus, he wasn't a distant historian. He was documenting the mood of his city in real time as the invasion unfolded. He perfectly captures the growing panic as rumors of the Franks turned into terrifying facts. As these reports followed one upon the other and spread from mouth to mouth, far and wide, the people grew anxious and disturbed in mind. This anxiety was not unfounded. Al-Qalanisi chronicles how this fear led to actual physical dislocation. As the Franks marched toward Jerusalem, he knows simply that the people fled in panic from their abodes before them. This shock also exposed the deep political fragmentation of the Levant. There was no unified state to meet the threat. Instead, local rulers, like the Lord of Antioch, had to send desperate individual appeals to neighboring cities like Damascus and Hims, scrambling to piece together a defense. In essence, Ibn al-Qalanisi's chronicle provides undeniable evidence of the immediate social trauma, a society gripped by fear, politically divided, and physically uprooted. This initial chaos was the critical starting point for the profound, long-term social transformations that would later reshape the region.
The economic implications of the First Crusade to the Levant, which is an introduction of some sort of an altered European feudalism to the Levantian land, is a result of an equilibrium between interest and efficiency. In some sense, the establishment of Franks can be regarded as the demo version of the colonialism in Africa. The reason is that the Franks have realized that the direct attempt of raiding is not only dangerous for the Franks established, however, it is also inefficient, for it is harmful for the crops and gains. For instance, the Franks settled in Galilee had seen that their war in Transjordan fields caused serious damage to the crops and the livestock. This realization, it must be noted, was mutual. The clashes between Franks and Muslims also damaged Muslims themselves, leading to casualties and distortion of normal life. That is, symmetric to the problems faced by Franks, the Frankish raids did not only result with the losses, but it also caused financial troubles for the Muslims as well, through the destruction of crops, livestock, and thereby higher prices for such goods. That is not to say that the Muslims were willing participants of what follows, especially the non-elite people. However, it is to say that the evils of war have resulted in an equilibrium. In conclusion, the Franks have decided that a form of a feudal system would be more beneficial to them, in that they have established a system where they impose royalties to the Muslim rulers, which are in turn collected from the Muslim people. What is crucial and specifically resembling of feudalism is that this transaction was not necessarily a monetary one. The Franks made the time to pay these taxes coincide with the harvesting of crops, in that they have allowed payments in kind as well as in dinar. This indeed was a typical practice in feudalism. The main difference, however, was that whereas in feudalism it was the Christian peasants who worked for the lords, in what is established after the Crusades, it was effectively the Muslim people.
The First Crusade is often remembered as a military expedition, but its most lasting effects on the Levant were deeply religious. By examining a crusader's first-hand account, Gesta Francorum, alongside Paul Cobb's The Race for Paradise, we can see how the crusade reshaped religious identity and relations in the region for centuries. Gesta Francorum is an anonymous eyewitness narrative written by a crusader who participated in the campaign. This source reveals how religion structured the crusaders' worldview. The author repeatedly interprets victories as a sign of God, and favors and hardships as a divine test. The journey to the Levant is not described as a political invasion, but as a sacred pilgrimage. Cities such as Antioch, and Jerusalem are portrayed as holy spaces whose conquest was seen as a religious duty. This mindset had direct consequences for the Levant. Violence was not merely a tolerated defense, but is justified through theology. Massacres and destruction are described without moral doubt, because the Crusaders believed they were fulfilling God's will. As a result, the Levant became a landscape where religious absolutism replaced coexistence, at least from the Crusaders' perspective. Christianity in this context was defined through opposition against Muslims, and often against Eastern Christians as well. Paul Cobb's The Race for Paradise allows us to see the other side of this transformation. Using Islamic sources, Cobb explains that Muslims in the Levant initially did not understand the Crusaders as participants in a holy war. They were first seen as foreign invaders or mercenaries. However, as Crusader states were established and violence continued, Muslim scholars and leaders began to reinterpret the conflict in religious terms. Cobb shows that the First Crusade contributed to the revival of strengthening jihad rhetoric in the Levant. Sermons, religious texts, and political language increasingly framed resistance as a religious obligation. Over time, the Crusades became embedded in Islamic cultural memory as a defining moment of religious confrontation. When these two sources are read together, it becomes clear that the First Crusade deepened the theological divide between Christianity and Islam. Crusaders arrived with a religious identity already shaped by holy war, while Muslim societies in the Levant developed their own religious responses as a result of the invasion. The Levant was transformed into a space of enduring political and religious conflict, where faith became inseparable from politics and violence. In conclusion, the First Crusade did not simply change who controlled the Levant, it changed how religion was understood and practiced on both sides. Through religious ideology, the Crusade shaped identities, justified violence, and left a legacy that would influence Christian and Muslim relations in the region for centuries.